there is a discussion of a future agenda item for the board with whenever, if there's more than two or more board members present. Consequently, this will become somewhat of an ad hoc board meeting, but that means we will have minutes, and it also means that right now I'm going to have to ask the secretary to call the roll so we do have an official record of which board members are here. So Celia, if you would call the roll, please.
Good evening, all. President?
Here.
Vice President?
Here.
Here. Treasurer?
Here.
Representing AVA, who do we have?
Henry's here.
Okay, anyone else from AVA?
I believe Aaron's joining us.
Atlantic region? Atlantic? Did I get someone from Atlantic?
I'm Marcy Lucas here. I'm with KSVA.
Okay,
Well,
I'm
we
looking
just-
for RDs right now,
Yeah,
or
just-
DRDs.
Sorry, my sound wasn't working.
Okay. Mid-America?
Present, and Don Gruber is also present.
Okay. North Central?
Here.
Northeast?
DRD, Cecilia, good evening.
Good evening. Northwest?
Deputy RD's on.
Pacific?
Here.
Rocky Mountain?
Deputies here.
South Central? South Central? Southeast? Got you, John. Southwest? Southwest region? That concludes the roll.
Cecilia, I'm here. This is Erin Grasso. I'm here.
Thank you.
Also, did you get our at-large member?
Oh, is Ben McDonald on?
Right here.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, now that the roll has been called, the meeting has been called to order. What I would like to do is make sure everybody understands the sole purpose of this meeting. The sole purpose of the meeting is to gather information and to answer questions. Gathering information from the clubs, from you folks out there in the great AVA nation, and attempting to answer your questions about the new governing documents, particularly the bylaws. There will be no decisions made at this meeting and no votes taken. To keep things running smoothly, I've asked Tim to serve as the facilitator, and you've heard what he's going to do with regard to questions. This should keep things moving, and we'll adjust things if necessary as things go on. Now, I'm not sure he's on board, but in case the members of the board, myself or other members of the board, couldn't answer your questions or there was something confusing, we did ask our attorney, Frank Somerville, to join us today. I don't know, Frank, were you able to get on?
I am here.
Well, thank you, Frank. Glad to have you aboard. We had taken Frank. Frank was our attorney of record, if you will, to develop the new bylaws and the replacement for the Articles of Incorporation. And so his purpose tonight is, one, answer the hard questions when we can't answer them, and two, if we inadvertently say something wrong, Frank will step in and make sure that we get it corrected so we don't pass on bad information. Let me remind everyone that the purpose of these changes was to get AVA back into compliance with Texas law. A lot of changes had been made in Texas business law and in the nonprofit laws, and no changes had been made correspondingly with AVA's governing documents. So we had to get those changed in order to be proper under the law. We took that as an opportunity, since over the years our bylaws had kind of just grown and they weren't exactly as organized as they should be, as easy to read. We asked Frank, in the process of getting us in compliance with Texas law, to also help us clean it up so that it's more readable, it's more usable, and to bring best practices from the nonprofit corporate world into our bylaws. So with that, I think I've laid the groundwork well enough. And so let me turn it back over to Tim to start the questions, and we'll attempt to make answers. Tim?
Thank you very much, sir. And again, for everyone here, I pretty much mute everybody except the speaker for background noise, and for bandwidth. You may not want to actually be on video except if you're the speaker, who would be one of the board members or whoever is the answering person. So it's best to go down, look at the bottom menu. Bottom left is your mute button. That's how, if you were asked to unmute, that's how you would unmute. And a red slash across your video is how you turn it off. And again, we're preserving bandwidth for everybody. We're right now at 56. We have the capacity for 500 on this particular call. So we can keep folks engaged and available. Also along the bottom, about 2/3 of the way from the left, about halfway through, is the word chat. Click on that, you'll see a menu, or you'll see a function on the right of your screen. And down at the very bottom is where you will type in your questions, please. I will be reading the questions. I'd like to ask you to type your name, your club, and your question. And as I said, I will be reading the questions off to the board members. We'll let them decide who gets to answer. All right. If you have any questions at any time, feel free to type it in there, even comments. And you are more than welcome to say whatever you want. This meeting is being recorded. That includes what you chat. So if you have a comment, realize your comment is also going to be recorded as part of the record of this meeting. So plan accordingly. With that in mind, sir, the first question comes from Mike Nagan from Seattle, Emerald City Wanderers. His question is, I'm very specifically interested in the effects of these changes on the clubs. A very broad question, but that's the first ball.
Okay, and I think we have a pretty straightforward answer on that. Texas clubs will need to be looking at their bylaws to ensure that they are in compliance with Texas law. It is not clear that anyone else would be directly affected other than how they interact, how our basic bylaws function. So if you're asking, are we going to have to rewrite our bylaws? It would appear to be not necessarily. And that's the best answer I know.
All right. Perhaps also to expand the question, how does the governance change in terms of member class? How are we evolving AVA, America's Walking Club, in terms of the club's place as a member class?
To be quite honest, it doesn't change. The members remain our clubs. They continue to have the same status that they had before, and there is no change in that regard.
Okay. There have been other questions were asked previously, and I have a list of those. And
sure,
one of them includes the role of affecting future change. How does the club's role in affecting future change?
That's an excellent question. Under the best practices, boards typically in the nonprofit and corporate world have the authority and responsibility to make changes to their bylaws. What we have in these bylaws is that exact terminology. In other words, with the appropriate suspenses and timelines, any proposed change to the bylaws would be submitted to the membership for their consideration and comment. They would give their feedback to their board member, and then the board would, at the end of the suspense period, take a vote on whether to make that change. So that is a significant change to how we are governed, but it gives us flexibility and gives us an opportunity to stay in tune with the law, as well as stay in tune with best practices in the nonprofit world. It does not, in my way of thinking, in a representative government sense, take away from the ability of clubs to play a role in how future changes take place within the bylaws.
Okay. Another previously asked question is,
Can I ask for a clarification there?
sure,
Sure.
go ahead, Mike.
Does that mean that clubs will no longer vote on bylaw changes?
It means that the board would do the voting, clubs would get the information, and I don't remember the exact timeline, but with adequate time to review and give the feedback to their board member, and their board member then would take that into account as they were voting yes or no on a change to the bylaws.
So the answer is no. Clubs have no role.
No,
have
not,
no
not,
vote.
they
Clubs
don't,
have no
they
vote.
they
in-
don't have a direct vote. That's correct.
Right. Okay.
Then the next question is, could you, because of some folks who weren't at the convention, could you describe the role of the member of the board at large, who that person represents, and what is the impact, who is the member class for that person, for that
Sure.
particular governance?
Sure. In fact, we have our first at-large member, Ben McDonald, online with us. And at the last convention, a change was made to the bylaws to create up to 3 seats on the board for at-large members. And the purpose behind that was to give associate members of AVA an additional voice in the governance of AVA. Consequently, the nomination and ultimately election of individuals to fill those seats is done by associate members, not by the clubs, but by associate members. And in this last period, the board, under the bylaws, has the authority and right to say how many seats are currently open in the at-large area, up to 3, and what are the particular skill sets that we're looking for. Our purpose of at-large in general was to bring outside thinking, new blood, skills that we don't have within the AVA community onto the board. Our problem in part is we are somewhat incestuous, meaning we're all Volksporters. We've been doing this for lots of years, and sometimes it's hard to think outside the box. Our goal was to bring in people who have experience as entrepreneurs, experience in running nonprofits, experience in finance, experience in the insurance industry, just run through the whole gamut of things that we might use on our board of skills. We had 1 nomination this last cycle, and with only 1 nomination, the way the bylaws are written, the board itself validated that position rather than going back out for a vote, as that vote would have not been particularly meaningful since there was only 1 person to vote for. But we were very fortunate that Ben had been made known to us and has already shown that he will be a very valuable member of the AVA board. And that's the purpose of the at-large, and then the sense of at-large being part of the benefit of being an associate member is you get an opportunity to nominate someone out in the community that might be an asset to AVA, and then getting them elected.
Okay. We have a question from Frank Sayers, Woodland Wanderers, AVA 915. The question is rather long. Frank, I'm going to ask you to unmute your button, please.
I think I can already tell you what it is, and I can answer it right away for Frank.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I'd heard about this before, and I realize why it's. He disagrees with the fact that the Article 16 says the content of the change to the bylaws or a summary would be sent out. I think what the board will do is drop the and summary part, because that's the sticking point. We should be giving the membership the exact wording and exact intent of any changes to the bylaws, and not attempt to summarize something which, you know, interpretation might get in the way. So I think that before the board, this is personal opinion, and I don't take a vote in this, but I think before the board will recommend these draft bylaws, that summary portion will be removed. And so, Frank, if that didn't answer your question, please let me know.
I got it. Thanks.
You're welcome, Frank.
All righty, again, for everyone, if you have a question, please go to the chat and type your name, your club, and your question from the previously. All right, Monica Haight from Walkin, Mass. Respectfully, with regard to the change to amend the bylaws, what other options did the board consider prior to deciding to remove club voting on future bylaws?
Well, it would appear that there's really two options. I mean, there may be others, but the two that we certainly look at are what we're doing now. And basically that means if you're going to change the bylaws, you either have to wait to a biennial convention, so it means wait 2 years, up to 2 years to make a change, or you have to call a special meeting, which has costs and complications. The other option is the one that was selected, and the one, quite honestly, that was recommended as a best practice, because that's what nonprofits, corporations, how they function in a best practices environment. So really, it was an either or. Keep doing it like we're doing, and have things such that we are not flexible and we are not fast on our feet to be able to make changes when we need to and stay up with Texas law and stay up with the changing world, or make the change where we give the board, who the membership elects and would get the feedback from the clubs, would make that vote.
Thank you. All right, Joseph, let's see. Okay, Catherine, I'm sorry, Two Town Walking Club, but I don't see a question. Catherine, do you want to unmute and just ask your question directly?
Sorry, I believe it went off before I had a chance to finish typing. The question is it absolutely required then that the board, by the Texas law, that the board vote, or would Texas law still have the option?
Yeah, it is. Frank can step in and correct me if I'm wrong, but it is my understanding that that's a best practice and not required by Texas law.
Because right now, sorry, go ahead, Frank, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I think the Business Organizations Code, which governs nonprofit corporations, allows the bylaws to either vest the authority with the members or with the board of directors. And what we tried to do in drafting this is come up with a means where members still had significant input into any amendments, but because you only meet as a membership every 2 years, it makes more sense to have the board of directors be allowed to make those amendments. Once we get these amended, I'm not anticipating many amendments in the future if it's working. There may be some minor changes, because what I tried to do was give you state-of-the-art bylaws and certificate of formation. And I've got ones that I've done for my clients of similar organizations from 2010 that have never been amended, because we correctly anticipated some changes, and also because we took advantage of everything that was part of the law change in 2006. So this, I think you're going to be pleased with the end product. And as far as the the amendment of the bylaws, it can go with the members or it can go with the board of directors, and the bylaws get to make that choice.
Okay, thank you. I was curious about that because, of course, in New England, many towns, even fairly large towns, they are still run by town meeting, which is somewhat similar to the current state of affairs at the AVA. And that may be a bit of a hard sell for some of the members here.
Understand that the advantage in the townships is they're at least all right there, so makes it a little harder for us to function. I see the next question from Judy refers to dividing up the NEC. That's not correct. One, the National Executive Council has already been morphed under the previous changes or before these changes into a board of directors. The board of directors is made up of the national officers and the regional directors and the at-large directors. And so what you really have is directors, regional and at-large, and national officers. And so there's no other real breakdown.
Could you, David, expand on that question, because we have a similar question related to just to reaffirm that the membership will still vote on
yes.
president
Yes.
and all that
Yes.
sort of stuff.
In fact, no negative reflection on Frank, but the standard, if you will, is the board elects its own officers, but that's not how we function. And we as a board said, no, we don't want to go that route. What we want to do is continue to have the board chair, because of, again, the way the law reads and the way that they define different positions. The chief executive officer, our ED, now CEO, chief executive officer, is referred to in Texas law as the corporate president. Okay, now we can't very well have a corporate president and a board president, because then when somebody would say, will the president please come forward, who goes up? Being a little facetious there, but the point is there's some name changes taking place. My position, I won't be in it, but my position as AVA president becomes AVA chairperson of the board chair. The vice president becomes vice chair. The secretary becomes board secretary. And the treasurer is not called the treasurer anymore, because that has specific legal ramifications within Texas law for a corporation. So that treasurer is all these positions are still elected by the membership, but the treasurer now is the chair of the finance committee of the board finance committee. But all four of those national positions remain elected by the membership. The RDs remain elected by their regions, and the at-large members, when we open seats like we did with Ben, are elected by the associate members. Does that answer it?
Yes, thank you. From Joe, from the Evergreen State Volk Sport Association, when you say the clubs won't need to change their bylaws to meet some Texas standard, I assume that also includes the state organizations.
That is my understanding, yes. You are a separate entity incorporated within your state, and as such, you must comply with your state laws to be legal, not Texas state law. You do have to be in compliance with our bylaws. Any rules that the bylaws establish need to be followed through, but that is not a Texas law thing.
Is there a relationship to these changes in the IRS, the individual components and how they relate to the IRS?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. From Mike Nagan again, looks like you want to change us from an association of clubs to a top-down organization like the Red Cross, Cancer Society, etc.
Well, I guess you could make that interpretation. What we're trying to do is become more efficient and more effective. And we're still driven by the clubs. The clubs are the root and the foundation of our organization. but we have to be able to make decisions at the national level and be able to put those into place in a timely manner. Consequently, we're trying to do that through the most efficient and effective form we can, which we're trying to reflect in these bylaws.
Great. There's a question from Frank from the Woodland Wanderers, and I'll just ask you to read it and answer it.
Yeah.
It appears to be specific to a clause.
Yep, another good question. It talks about the nominating committee and how it appears they can be anybody off the street. Well, I would point out that in the current bylaws and this revised bylaws, there's nothing in the bylaws that said the president of AVA has to be a member of AVA, or even a Volksporter for that matter. And so I don't think that's an issue that we need to worry about, that we're going to be dragging people in off the street to be on our nominating committee. We didn't specify that any of the national officers had to be a member of AVA or had to be even Volksporters.
David, you just brought up a point that actually speaks to one of the other questions off there.
Sure.
And that is the role of, there is a fear, and I'm summarizing some of these comments. There is a fear. Our basic product is the Volksmarch, based on IVV rules. That's the product we've been selling for over 40 years, more or less. There is a fear that that product is going to go away, or there is some morphine of that product out there in our reason for existing.
Well, I think that's a legitimate concern. Fear may be too strong a word, but I would call your attention to the curves of membership and the curves of participation, and ask yourself, as people are asking this question, do we need to be doing something else or something different or some other way? I don't think Volksporting itself ever goes away, but I think how we produce the product, how we sell the product to the public, how we what the results of the product are, has to change. If it doesn't change, we're going to die. I mean, that's the reality in this. We're all getting older. We're not recruiting new people. How do we recruit new people? Is there a new business model that we can use that will augment what we do as Volksporters? I would never advocate that we would be getting rid of Volksporting, of any of the Volk sports, walking, swimming, snowshoeing, even though I've never done it, but any of those. But I am an advocate for finding other ways that we sell our product and other ways that we do business. It's as simple as that.
And related to that question, since it's related to our final product, there was also a question about they've heard the term we're a health organization, when we're not trained to teach other people. We're not physiologists. We're not medical people teaching other people how to handle it. I think this element 3 created a sense that we're something more than us going out and walking for our own benefit.
Well, I think element 3 is a great example of how, if COVID had come along in particular, we were positioned in an extremely good way to be the provider of an essential element of what element 3 was marketing. Element 3 is marketing to insurance companies and health organizations. We were going to be, and are, the preeminent source of outdoor physical activity as well as socialization, because that's what our clubs do. They go out and walk, or they go out and bike, or they go out and swim, but then they socialize. So it's not a matter, I mean, what we're trying to do in part of this is connect to the fact that what we do is a significant health impact. So we're not looking that we would be health teachers, but we sure could persuade people and tell people how they'll be a lot healthier if they're out walking, if they'll be a lot healthier. And again, this is all pre-COVID, obviously, because our socialization now is behind a mask and at double arm's length. But still, there's some socialization even in that, and we can be a significant factor in helping people And so I don't think there should be concern that we're morphing into some kind of a health education organization. There is an element there, but that's not our primary purpose.
Thank you. Question from Susan from the Texas Trail Roundup. Will AVA be able to provide some guidance to the Texas Club to get them into compliance?
We'll work with the clubs as best we can, and we'll provide guidance where we can. So
Great.
the answer to that is yes, as best we can.
Okay. Another question from Frank from the Woodland Wanderers, and again, it appears to be something I'm going to ask you to read because apparently
Yeah,
what it's saying.
I tried to address that because I knew that had been a question, and I apologize to whoever, if Frank was the original source of these questions, but I had gotten an email with these questions and was too busy to try to put this down in writing. And I knew this was coming up, so I was hoping I'd have the opportunity. No, when in answer to the question it asks is, should it also say member clubs to nominate? No, the intent of this was to provide another membership benefit to being an associate member. So it was a deliberate effort to make it only for associate members to make these nominations. And with that, then that was what was pitched, if you will, at the last convention and approved. I'm sorry there's still confusion about it, but the whole idea is to provide a mechanism by which people who are paying to be associate members, whether they're life or annual, have a bit of a benefit to say, hey, I know somebody who is an exercise physiologist and's written a book. I bet they would be great on our board, and nominate them to be on our board. And then associate members are the ones that would decide between that individual and someone else as to who would be taking that next open seat on the board.
Our vice president appears to have a comment. Nancy, I'll ask you to go ahead and unmute, ma'am.
Yes, there was a comment about IVV and keeping Volks Sporting or Volks Marches in this. We already have ACE events. I don't know if any of your clubs have done them, but they're not IVV at all. They are AVA events, which do not have to follow IVV rules. So we're already expanding beyond what IVV requires, because not everybody can walk a 5K or a 10K, or they don't want to be public like a school.
Let me jump in. Thank you, Nancy. That's an excellent point. Let me jump in because right now we're doing if you will, a virtual IVV Congress. And one of the things that is very obvious from the documents, and was obvious at the last Congress that I went to, is we're way ahead of IVV in attempting to structure ourselves for the future. IVV is going through, and all the member countries are going through the same kinds of declining membership, declining events, and we're the ones that are showing the way that there are other ways of doing business. And some of you will remember that we didn't used to have 5Ks because those were not IVV approved. And it was AVA and other countries that particularly I think AVA, that proposed to the IVV that we wanted 5K events approved. Now there are 5K events all over the world because they recognized, and it was approved, and then people recognized that, as Nancy said, as we age, we're not all ready to do 10Ks all the time. And that's where organizations like IML recognize that when they have requirements for 20Ks, that you have to do 2 20Ks in order to qualify for the stamp in their book. If you're over a certain age, no, you only have to do a 10K, because they recognize that we are changing, our demographic is changing, and we've got to accommodate our people or we force them right out of business.
Great, thank you. Comment from Pat, well taken. Her comment was about Volksmarch as a dated term. Yet there are many club members, Pat, who, again, pre-submitted questions, who are very adamant that their Volksmarch is in their club name and they're there to do that product. And that's what they're there for. And that's what they remember. Yes,
that's fine. But recognize one of the reasons that we changed from we're just doing business as AVA, America's Walking Club, rather than always going up front to people at the very beginning and saying, we're the American Volksport Association. Because half the time you get a deer in the headlights look, and then you get, oh, is that those little cars? So we have to recognize that society has changed, and we want to adjust, not to lose our history or lose who we are, but be prepared to be able to market ourselves to a new generation. And that new generation may actually be the folks in their 50s and 60s, since we're not, or many of us aren't, no offense to anybody. But the bottom line is, that's true. We are having to use other terminology, having to move forward to try to capture another demographic, new people, and the best approach has been, don't use Volksport in your first sentence, because that then causes all sorts of, just like don't try to explain stamping books. Not right away. Get them hooked on the socialization, on the fun of walking, on the fun of biking and swimming, then get them hooked on the rest of it.
Great. For Board Member John McClellan, you had a comment, sir. You want to unmute and share?
It was for one of the previous questioners, but what I was saying was, it was on the issue of who can nominate at-large board members. Again, associates are in our clubs. If you're in a club and you want to whisper to an associate, this would be a good member, the associate can make that nomination. Your club has, in effect, provided a nomination. They've done it through the approved method, which is the AVA associate. Likewise, any other member of a club who might get interested in the composition of the board can become an AVA associate, and then they are empowered to make that nomination. So it's a pathway that goes through our associate members, and also encourages associate membership among club members.
Good point, John. Good point.
Nancy, back to you, ma'am. You had another comment?
Yeah, somebody said something about going out and walking ourselves, that was the purpose of all this. And I would implore all of you to read the mission of AVA. It's in the bylaws. It's in the articles, or not articles anywhere, certificate of formation. Our job, our mission is to get people to get off the couch, essentially, and walk. It isn't just to become club members. It's to get people to walk. By getting them to walk with you, they find out that you're really not bad and you're a lot of fun, and maybe they'd like to be part of your club. But get them to walk first. That's my comment.
Good point, Nancy. And the AVA's mission: promote and organize non-competitive fitness activities that encourage lifelong fun, fitness, and friendship for all ages and abilities. And then our vision is increasingly engage Americans in lifelong walking and other non-competitive physical fitness activities. One of our problems, I'll just use this as my bully pulpit, one of our problems has been for years, as we attempt to get grants and get people to partner with us, is they see us as self-serving. Just what Nancy is saying, they see us as doing this only for ourselves. But the mission of a club should be outreach. Yeah, set up those walks, make those things happen, but do it in a way that you attract other people to, as Nancy said, get off the couch, get out, and start walking. It's a health thing, and we can be a big part of helping the U.S. get healthier.
Mike had another comment about his comment was, but we only want others to walk with us if they cough up some dough, and I'm not sure that's correct. So back to you. Back to you, sir.
Well, there is an expense to every business, and our business has expenses. One of those expenses, and one of the biggest ones, is insurance. And the whole issue, and I don't want to get into that because that, I mean, we're way off into other things, but the whole point of pushing the general aspect of if you walk, you pay for the benefit, or you're paying for that insurance, you're paying for the quality of walk and all these other things. But we have not mandated that. That remains. We're trying to educate clubs as to why we want to see fewer permanent free walkers. There's nothing wrong with the free walker in my mind if you're using that as a tool to attract someone to become part of your organization. What I see as a problem is the person that's walked for 20 years and is always walking for free. But that's a whole nother issue, and not one that I would rather that we spend too much time on tonight.
Let's see. Again, from Frank, again, I'll ask you, David, to please read that.
Sure. The question deals with nominations from the floor. And this was a best practice that was recommended by our attorney, that we no longer do nominations from the floor at convention for the national offices. And we incorporated that. We discussed it within the board, and then we put that in our, had that in the bylaws. And part of the rationale there is that when you do nominations from the floor, you have an unknown quantity coming up. There's been no opportunity for any vetting. There's no opportunity for the individual to sell themselves as adequate for the job. It has seemingly more negatives than positives. And consequently, while we always could suspend the rules, I guess, and take a nomination from the floor if we had no other nominations, but the bottom line is that was the rationale that was being used. And Frank, you can step in and correct me if I've said something wrong there.
No, David, you got it right. You want people to serve who are prepared to serve, who are ready to make that commitment. You don't want it to be a spontaneous. These are too important of decisions to be made on the spot. And by going through a nomination process and doing the vetting and making sure that person is qualified and willing to serve and enthusiastic about serving, is a lot more positives that you get from that process than you can get from 4 nominations.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you. From B, a question with regard to Article 10 referencing keeping records for 3 years. Does it mean no longer retain start cars for 7?
No, this is the difference between what Texas law is requiring the corporation to keep and what the IRS requires our clubs to keep. And so it's my understanding that 7 years is an IRS requirement, not a Texas law requirement. So no, I'm sorry, you do not get relieved, and you can't go throwing out 4 years worth of start cards. Keep them in that box in your garage, and hopefully we never have to look for them. Or you don't ever have to look for them. I don't plan to.
All right.
David, can I just make a comment?
Yes, Aaron, go ahead.
Yes, we do have to keep between 5 and 7 years, whether it's payroll to start cards. It differs in some realms, but yes, as a rule of thumb, they do have to keep those records.
Okay, thank you, Aaron.
Nancy says, set up the OSB and it's already done for you.
Yeah.
Good point, Nancy.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, we're at the bottom of the questions, but this is a great time because there were so many questions about this membership at large on the board. Could you explain, introduce our member at large, why you picked him, what skill set is he bringing in, and what is his vision? Because he's going to have a vote as equal to any regional director.
Absolutely. And what I'm going to do is tell you that Ben sought us out And he was looking for an organization that was a fitness type organization that he felt would be a good fit for his business. And he actually started attending as a visitor to our online board meetings, and had some excellent ideas. And let me, Ben, if you wouldn't mind, why don't you tell folks a little bit about your background and why you decided to throw yourself at AVA?
Oh, you're doing such a great job. You don't need my help. No, I'm kidding. Thank you, Dave. Hi, folks. My name is Ben. I think some of you got a chance to meet me. I guess it was like midsummer. I just kind of crashed a few of the meetings, and I just really enjoyed the participation. I enjoyed that you guys were active. I enjoyed the diversity I saw, and just that, I thought it was really beneficial that you had meetings throughout the year. And even though, we were kind of getting hit with the COVID so badly, you guys got online and just as active. And I like too that in spite of the COVID and how it's shutting everything down, like I couldn't even go use my gym membership, all the gyms are frozen up. So I just love the idea that even in the middle of a crisis like this, you still had the ability to function. And it just says something to me that you actually are in a position to be very attractive, even though I guess one of the things is the terminology for a lot of younger people is unknown. And just because of visibility, maybe people have not seen or know very much about Volksing. I'm saying it wrong. How do you say it again, Dave?
Volksporting.
Volksporting, yes. I mean, I had to go into the About Us and look up the history and all that, but I just thought it was fascinating that the club or the organization has such long, deep roots, and not just in the U.S., but started in Germany, of course. And I was just looking for a place that I could belong to. I really wanted to get out and use a lot of my skills that I haven't used in a while, that I learned from working with some entrepreneurs who start some companies, and I started on the ground floor with them. So I was just really involved with helping idea to take off into how can we make this work, how can we make it blend into what our mission is, how can we get people involved, how can we attract people. And I thought, that's very valuable, and I really enjoy doing it. I mean, I just got a kick out of doing that and problem solving. So when I saw that you guys had a need, a lot of other people were like, man, how do we get this problem? And I was like, yes, a problem. So I'm just really excited for what's going on with the club, how the club is trying to bridge the gap between, like was mentioned before, younger people, whether that's 50, whether that's people in their 20s, and just at the same time, how to keep the relevance with the members who've been doing it for years. I think there's some ways you can do it. There's some ways you can find it. You can create something that maybe no one else has done or seen. So that's my purpose for being here.
Well, thank you, Ben. Tell folks a little bit about your beer connection.
Oh, well, I hated beer, I liked it when I was in my 18, 19 in college, but, consume mass quantities, if you guys remember the Coneheads from SNL. But after I got out of college, I didn't need, those kind of scenes in order to meet people. And so subsequently, I just didn't drink beer. I didn't think beer was very attractive. I didn't think it was very flavorful. And then comes along Jimmy Carter's change and him changing a law that affected nationally people that could then make beer in their garages and then open up a brewery, which you saw happen in the 80s. And slowly, like companies like Bell's Beer and Sierra Nevada and so forth. But that rolled into now you have almost in every neighborhood with a large enough community breweries, that could service their local neighborhood. So that's what got me attracted. Was I like to cook, I like to tinker, I like to experiment, I like to learn, especially. And when I learned that going into a brewery that makes homemade beer essentially, but on a bigger scale, tastes completely different than say a Budweiser or Coors, and has all these different levels of flavor, I was in. And it was just a matter of me sharing it with my friends and learning how to make beer at home. And then it was just, it was just a community kind of thing. And I like the idea that, actually how I came across you guys was your website, and I saw the video that you had where you were talking to people who had experience walking with you for the first time, and I was like, wow, that's almost like the same. That's sort of the same result when you're talking to someone who goes to a local brewery. A lot of the smaller ones don't really have TVs in them like you would expect. That's because when you come in there, you might come in by yourself. You start talking to the brewer. You start talking to patrons who live in a neighborhood and can tell you the history of the neighborhood. And, you know, you have one or two friends before you leave there. So I thought that's really similar to what happens with this group's walks. You may have people come on it for the first time, maybe decide, you know, it's pretty cool. I think I'll do it again. And before you know it, it's a lifetime event for them. So I thought that seems to be a really good pairing. And I think that's a really good way of bringing people into it, where maybe along the walk, at the end of the walk, you know, looking at some neighborhood art, maybe looking at, you know, parts of the neighborhood that are getting developed, talking to them about it. And then we end at the brewery where you have some of the same like-minded people, and the people that just came off the walk, hey, this is what we just did. This is great. And all of a sudden, that's helped expanding the visibility of AVA.
Thank you, Ben. Now, I think everybody can hear the enthusiasm that Ben brings to us. For someone who has not been a Volksporter, check out the article in TAW. You'll see his bio and a full expose of who Ben is. So thank you, Ben. Do appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
We have a question from Monica from Walkin' Mass about vacancies for an election. Dave, I'll ask you to read that.
It basically is saying that in one section we talk about there's a election necessary to fill RD vacancies, and then there's a section that says the DRD, the deputy, fills in for the role. I can understand a little confusion there. The concept here is if there is a temporary gap, the DRD steps into the gap. If it is a permanent gap, then the region is going to have to hold a special election ultimately to fill the RD position. But the DRD in the interim would be serving as the RD. And we'll look at that. We'll make a note of that one, and we'll look to see if we need to refine any of the words there. But the concept is, yes, the DRD steps in, but that stepping in is on a temporary basis until an election can be held. Whether it's if it's short term before the normal 2 years, then it probably wouldn't happen until the regular time. If it were at the beginning of a term, then the region's probably going to need to have a special election in order to either make the DRD the RD and then bring in a new deputy, or someone else to step in as the RD.
Great. Again, we're at the bottom of our question pile right now with only a few minutes to go to keep our sense of a 1 hour time. I'll turn it back to you, Dave, to either to summarize or to anything else you would like to say, sir.
Well, the first thing I want to say is, again, to thank Tim for setting up these webinars. I've always felt that we needed more communication up and down. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not big in and on Facebook because it sucks all the life out of me and all the time I have. So I don't tend to get into it as much as maybe I should. But these webinars are a great opportunity to put a focused effort on one subject, like these governing documents. And I greatly appreciate everybody that participated. Whether you asked questions or you didn't, you had interest in what was going on. So what I would urge you to do is look at these things, talk to your RD, send your RD an email and say, I don't understand this, or I think this ought to be worded this way. And I see Frank has made a point, which is from the original that I again, failed to answer. There's some typos and some punctuation and some other formatting things that need to be fixed. Yes, we will be working hard to fix those. This has been so much harder job than I ever expected. We greatly appreciate the efforts. We paid for those efforts, but we greatly appreciate all that Frank Somerville did to get us to where we are. That's why you pay someone like Frank to do this, is because, as he said, they have helped us produce a document that we believe will last for years and years without having to be further amended. We have some tweaks that need to be done right now, and some areas that maybe need to be changed. We are looking at cleaning these things up, making sure that we've got it the way that it should be, and then when it's all said and done, the board will be, as they would do for any bylaws change, will be making a recommendation. They'll take a vote and they'll make a recommendation to the membership to approve or not approve. Obviously, if they vote to not approve, we got to go back to the starting point and fix whatever it is. If they vote to recommend to the membership to approve, at the same time, we will be establishing a special meeting of the membership. We've done this before. It's not something that we want to do, but it's something that we need to do because we need to get this fixed, done, and move on. We need to spend our time on the board on other things once we get this established, but we've got to get ourselves into compliance with Texas law, and we need to do it now, not in 6 months. So we have a meeting scheduled in December that is the standard electronic meeting, and we ask that people get their comments into their RDs prior to say December 12th or 13th. The meeting's on the 15th, but even the RDs, even though they walk on water, they need to have some time to assess what their membership is telling them. And then when we go to that meeting, we will attempt to resolve everything that we can and come out with something that we believe that the membership ought to approve. So
Dave,
that
I believe that question actually was referring to the next webinar.
Well, there will be, I'm sure, another webinar. And with that, but let me do this because this has been a formal meeting of the AVA Board of Directors. At this point, this meeting is adjourned.
All right. Well, with that said, sir, I guess we'll call this meeting closed then. And for those who are interested in next month, if you have a topic for one of these webinars, please let me know. These are sponsored by the program committee. We like to talk about and educate on anything we can as a national organization, reaching out to all our clubs. And again, sir, thank you.
Tim,
Sure.
let me jump in real quick because I just saw Frank Sayers had asked. Yes, we will send out updated copy with any changes that are made to the membership before we call for a vote. So you'll have the final version, and that will be what you're voting on, not something that you think we have put together.
Great. Well, that said, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording